And
Good.
there we are.
Yes, finally.
Good
Ah,
evening.
good evening. How nice for you to be with us. For those who drop in, we have award-winning Lancashire tourism superstar and ghost tour Simon Entwistle. I hope I pronounce it very well.
You certainly have, yes, perfectly, actually, perfectly.
Thanks, thank you. So to start off, I have a whole line with three questions in it. How did you get into doing ghost tours in the first place? And do you have any connections with the paranormal field?
Well, I got involved in ghost walks really through an incident that took place when I was 5 years old, when my father actually saw a ghost. It's a story which absolutely fascinates me, and I can assure you it is a very, very true story. Shall I tell the story now, folks?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you would like, yes,
Amuse us.
please.
Okay, I call this story the 44 million to one against because it is such an unusual story, but it's also, I can assure you, a very true story. Way back in 1960, I was just 5 years old. My mum and dad had purchased a house in the English Lake District, a rather beautiful place called Cumbria. And I remember getting into the removal vehicle and driving up to the Lake District and seeing this beautiful house. And as I gazed up at the building, I fell in love with it right away. And I thought, how fortunate am I to live in such a beautiful building? Now, I was only 5 years old. My sister was 2 years old, and my brother 8 years old. So mum and dad made our beds up very, very quickly. And after the long journey to our new home, we all fell into a deep sleep. But mum and dad continued to work until the early hours of the morning. They were unloading packing crates of knives and forks, cutlery, etc. And around 2 o'clock in the morning, they thought, let's make our bed up and turn in. Because it was a country house, the last thing they needed to do really was to put any curtains up. And my dad turned over in bed and noticed bright, bright moonlight was coming through the window, and it seemed to illuminate the whole bedroom. He then heard the sounds of tiny footsteps, and at first he thought it's either me or my 2 year old sister, who got a bit scared in the night. But as the bedroom door opened, in came a liver and white cocker spaniel dog. And the dog sat in the corner of the room, and my dad got out of bed and thought, how's this dog got into the house? He walked across the creature and put his hand on the collar, but his hand went straight through it. He made a second attempt, and his hand went through the dog again. The dog then turned to look at the window as if its name was being called. It then faded away. My father sat on the end of the bed in a state of shock, as you can imagine. He'd seen something very, very paranormal. At the same time, my mother woke up with a jolt and she said, I've had a strange dream, a very, very clear dream. There's a man outside in Victorian clothing with a top hat, a long Victorian frock coat, with a dog lead in his hand, pointing up at our bedroom window. My father told her what he'd just seen, and they put two and two together. Now, I was only a little boy, so they didn't tell me because they didn't want to frighten me or my sister or brother. But at the age of 15, my parents sold the house, and my father told me the story. And in that period of time, I'd had a happy Christmas, many happy birthdays, and I really grew to love the house, and still do. As he locked the door for the last time to give the keys to the new owners, I had a lump in my throat. I was quite emotionally upset, really, about leaving such a lovely location. However, something very, very spooky happened only 8 years ago. My wife and I went on a Mediterranean cruise on a beautiful ship called the Oceana. We went to all those beautiful Mediterranean ports, and on board they had many parties, and I wore a dinner jacket, bow tie to go to some events. And in one of the restaurants, there was a young lady that kept smiling at me, and I thought, I really cannot be that good looking. As it happened, she knew me. She came from a village not too far from where I live in Lancashire. And she said, "It's Simon, isn't it?" "That's right. I am the events manager on this vessel called the Oceana. Have you ever thought about doing a PowerPoint show, storytelling to an audience on a ship?" I thought, well, would people like ghosts? Would they like witches? Would they like murder? "You'd be very surprised," she said. "I'm going to give you an email address." She gave me the email address of P&O ferries and indeed P&O cruises. And I sent them a CV. And within 3 days, much to my joy, I'd got an audition. I could either go down to Sussex in the south of England or to Cumbria in the north of England, not too far from where I live now, really. So it was obviously Cumbria was my choice. I was given a telephone number to telephone a lady called Maureen, which I did do. She was the cruise director. And she said, "Simon, bring your laptop, bring your stories," which are all up here, by the way, "and I'll audition you and see if your stories are ideal for the vessel." "My house is very hard to find," she said. "It's deep in the Lake District." I said, "Well, I know the lakes quite well. I used to live there some time ago." "Oh, you won't find my house," she said. "I'll give you what's called a sat-nav code." I remember the day of the audition. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I put the sat-nav code into my car and found myself driving what's called the Trough of Bowland, a beautiful forest area in Lancashire, then down to the city of Lancaster and turning right up towards South Lakeland to Cumbria. I went past my old primary school, my old secondary modern school, up a beautiful mountain road through a forest, down the back of the forest, and up a very, very familiar driveway. It was the same house my father had sold in 1973. When I got there,
Wow.
I was shocked, as you can imagine. And I looked up at the familiar 3-story limestone building with the forest behind it. And Maureen came to the door and she said, "Simon, come on. We need to get this audition done. We need 6 hours of material. You look a bit jaded," she said, which is an English term for being a little bit shocked. I said, "Well, Maureen, I know you won't believe this, but I used to live here." "All right," she said. I did have some photographs on my laptop which confirmed my childhood there. And she said, "I'll make you a cup of tea." She went into the kitchen and she came out with a tray of tea, milk, sugar, spoons, etc. And I just happened to mention the liver and white cocker spaniel that my father had seen in the room upstairs. Maureen dropped the tray. Her eyes widened. I can still see the sugar and the milk going across the carpet. She said, "Oh, Simon, that's strange. My brother lives in the city of London. Every year he comes to see me and he spends Christmas with us. The very, very first Christmas, he would have had what would have been your mother and father's bedroom upstairs. He told us on Christmas morning, as he came down for his breakfast, that in the early hours of the morning, the bedroom door had opened and in came a liver and white cocker spaniel dog. I looked at the ceiling. My dad had died way back in 1982. And I just said, 'Thank you, Dad.' And that's why and how I got involved in ghost walks. Someone like my father would never, ever lie. And of course, Maureen's brother confirmed the story. It is a ghost of a dog, but that ghost definitely exists. Thank you.
That
Beautiful.
was incredible. Definitely incredible.
Yeah, it
The,
is.
yeah, it's an amazing story, but a very true one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I would probably be shocked if there was a ghost dog in the corner of my room. And my wife waking up with a dream that is like vivid, like there's a man outside the window with a dog lead.
That's right. That's right.
I would be in shock.
I can still see my mum. I mean, I talked to my mum and dad about it many times, and they wouldn't need to lie. There's no need to
No,
fabricate the story, which
yeah,
makes it even better, really.
exactly,
absolutely.
exactly. Oh man,
Ah,
I had goosebumps halfway the story. I
I
like it when
love
that
it.
happens.
Really how I got
Really.
involved in ghost walks, really.
Yeah, I've seen the panel which tours come by. Um, I'm sure you've done many, many more, but the panel which tours, what's that about?
Well, it's the most famous witch trial in British history, the most famous one. And it took place in an area where, not too far from where I am now, a place called the Forest of Pendle. And surrounding the Forest of Pendle in 1612 was a very, very deep forest. It was away from society. At that period of time, we just lost a very, very famous queen called Queen Elizabeth I. And she was replaced by a gentleman called King James VI of Scotland, who then became King James I of England. And this man was absolutely paranoid about witchcraft. He not only believed that witches existed, he believed they were actually out to get him. He was also an ardent Protestant, and he hated the Catholics with a vengeance. And he believed that Catholicism and witchcraft were exactly the same thing. So therefore, he wrote a book called Demonology. You can buy that book today from any leading bookshop. And as you pick it up, how to find a witch, how to try a witch, and most importantly, how to eradicate a witch. Now, throughout the whole length of Great Britain, this area called the Forest of Pendle was isolated. It was away from civilization. And living in that forest were two very elderly women, Elizabeth Southern and Anne Whittle. Both women were quite capable of fixing broken bones. They knew how to reduce temperatures. They knew how to use various plants. And of course, all modern medicines come from plants. What's quite unusual about these two women is they were both over 85 years old. And we are told in 1612, you'd be lucky to see your 35th birthday. But these two women were doing very, very well. In the case of Elizabeth Southern, she had a nickname. They called her Dem Dyke. She had a daughter called Elizabeth Device, and she had 3 children, James, Alison, Jeanette Device. And they lived in a little hovel, a one-roomed limestone hovel called Malkin Tower on the side of Pendle Hill. The remains are still there to this very, very day, and I take guided tours to the actual building. Living nearby in the village of Newchurch in Pendle was indeed Anne Whittle, commonly known as Bessie Chattox, and her daughter Anne Redfern. These were the main Pendle witches, but the story really started on the 18th of March 1612 when Alison Device had to walk along the length of Pendle Hill. She is 14 years old and she is the granddaughter of Demdike. She has the misfortune, and it really was misfortune, of meeting a Halifax peddler called John Law. John Law was basically a walking salesman, a large pack on his back full of 1612 luxuries. He would go to various villages selling his wares. He was also a bit like a walking newspaper. He met young Alison, and Alison begged of him, "Oh, please, sir, you can spare just a couple of pins to pin me clothing together, sir. Just a couple of pins, sir. Get away with you. I'm not taking me pack off for you, lass. You got no money. You're no use to me." According to John Law, the Halifax peddler, out of the mist, out of the heather, appeared this huge black dog with snarling white teeth and glowing red eyes, and the dog sat next to Alison. And the dog talked. "Alison, I can lame him for you." "Lame him! Lame him!" she screamed. Law felt this terrible pain on his left arm, his left leg, and collapsed in agony beneath the shadow of Pendle Hill. The kind people of the local town, a town called Cone, could see him. They got a stretcher party together and they carried him to an old alehouse which has long since gone. And the landlord, Jonathan Eglinton, spoon-fed him, cleaned him. As Law's voice returned, Law shouted, "I've been cursed! There's a witch in the forest, a young lass with a dog. I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. She didn't league with devil. Send letters back to my family." A series of letters were sent back to Halifax, West Yorkshire, to the home of John Law. His eldest son Abraham received the first letter. "Oh, my father's in trouble, I better go and collect him." He set off from Halifax, arrived in the market town of Cone, and walked into the Greyhound Inn, and saw his father in this twisted and contorted state. "Father, what's happened to you, man? You look terrible." "Abraham, I met a young lass in the Forest of Pendle. She had a dog. The dog talked. She's in league with devil. The dog talked to her. She talked to it. They've cursed me. I can't move my left leg. Can't move my left arm. I want you, lad, to go and find her, bring her here, reverse the curse." Well, Abraham must have been quite a brave lad, because he set off into the Forest of Pendle and found this one-roomed limestone hovel called Malkin Tower. There he hammered on the door. The door opened, and there was James Devise, Alison's brother. Can you help me, sir? I want to see Alison Devise. My father wants to see her. Where is she? That's my sister, sir. She's in here. Alison came to the door. Right, lass, you're coming with me. My father wants to see you. Against her wish, against her will, she is dragged into the old alehouse, where she makes eye contact with John Law, the Halifax peddler. John Law looks up from his sick bed. It's you. You're the witch. You've cursed me. That dog you had. I heard it talk, lass. You're in league with devil, aren't you? Admit it. This 14-year-old girl, on bended knees, begged and begged and begged forgiveness. She had no idea. She has just admitted to a state capital offence of witchcraft. And strange enough, John Law, the Halifax peddler, is about to forgive her, but not his son Abraham. Oh no, we'll have you for this. I'm going to go and get magistrate. And in doing so, he opened the most famous witch trials in Great Britain. The local magistrate was called Roger Nowell. He lived in the village of Reed near Burnley. He had his book of demonology, which the king had written, was fully aware of the king's paranoia. He also knew if he could incriminate this young girl, he was indeed going to curry favour with the King of England, King James I. So Alison is arrested. She's brought to Reed Hall, Burnley, where the magistrate lived. And for the second time inside 24 hours, Alison bursts into tears and begs forgiveness. But she gave Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, a lot more information. My grandmother, Demdike, she's a witch. So's Bessie Chattox and her daughter Anne Redfern. We have familiars, sir. Familiars? What's a familiar? Said Roger Nowell. Dogs, sir. 4 of them. Chattox has got one called Fancy. My grandmother's got one called Bull. My brother's got one called Dandy. And I've got one called Tib. These dogs talk to us. They tell us to make clay pictures. Clay pictures? What's a clay picture? Sir, they are dolls made of clay, but with human hair and human teeth. The dogs then tell us, they talk to us, they say, look, crumble the clay picture over the fire. And people die, sir. Roger Nowell was actually delighted. He had a confession. He wasn't scared. He knew he was going to curry favour with the King of England personally. So therefore he gave orders for Demdike, Chattox, these 2 elderly women, and Anne Redfern to be arrested. They are brought to Reed Hall, Burnley, where young Alison is, and this huge argument erupts. They all try and blame each other. There's no love between Chattox and Demdike, and they thought they'd try and blame each other to get off the charge of witchcraft. But in doing so, all 4 of them unwittingly admit to the state capital offence of witchcraft, and they are sent to the city of Lancaster and thrown into a deep, deep dungeon, which is still there to this very day, called the Well Tower. In the meantime, at the little cottage called Malkin Tower, Elizabeth Devise is very worried about her grandmother Demdike. She's very worried about her daughter Alison, and she organises what has gone down in history as the Good Friday meeting, where all these other so-called witches gathered in the forest of Pendle. It must have looked a bit like a scene from a Shakespeare play, as Alison's brother James slaughtered the sheep from the fell. They dined on fresh mutton, fresh roasted mutton. They then got this large cooking vessel called a cauldron, lit a fire beneath it, and the black syrupy liquid inside began to bubble and steam, and into that black bubbling liquid went crushed, powdered human teeth, the odd clay pitcher, and we are told the odd human scalp. The whole idea, apparently, was to get a potion together to blow the gates of Lancaster City Castle open and rescue their loved ones. But nothing happened. What did happen is word of the Good Friday meeting reached the ears of Roger Nowell. He gave orders that every single person who had attended this meeting in the forest should be arrested immediately. The persons who were arrested were Jeanette Preston of Gisborne, West Yorkshire, Catherine Hewitt of the market town of Colne, Elizabeth Devise, James Devise, and Jeanette Devise of Malkin Tower, John and Jane Bullcock, a mother and son from the village of Blacko, and by far the biggest star of them all, Alice Nutter of Roughlee. They are all sent to Lancaster, with the exception of the two Jeanettes. Jeanette Preston comes from West Yorkshire, so she's sent to the city of York. Her husband goes with her, villagers go with her, and they beg for her release. But the circuit judges said, I'm sorry, the king has signed her death warrant. Her husband shouted, but she won't get a fair trial. I'm sorry, the king's word is final. She was found guilty of the murder of her employer, Mr. Thomas Lister. She'd been nursing him. He had a very, very high temperature. And in those days, life expectancy would be 35 if you're lucky. He had a very high temperature. She's mopping his brow and shouts, "You're a witch, lass, you're a witch." He died that day, and Jeanette wrapped his body in a clean white sheet, ready for burial. And 2 days before the burial, she touched the sheeting and some fresh blood came through the sheet. This was classed as witchcraft. She made a plea of not guilty in York, but the king had signed her death warrant, and she became the very, very first of the Pendle witches to be executed on the 29th of July, 1612, in the city of York. The other Jeanette in the story, she's the youngest of the devised children, whilst her grandmother Demdike, her mother Elizabeth, her brother James and sister Alison have been sent to Lancaster. She has been sent to live with the local magistrate Roger Nowell. And for the first time in her life, she has 3 meals a day, a lovely warm bed to sleep in, and nice clothes to wear. She has no idea, but she is going to play a very, very important role in the prosecution of her entire family and all those people I've just mentioned. Roger Nowell was delighted. He wrote to the king, King James, who sent 2 circuit judges from the city of London, James Altham, Edmund Bromley, this young boy called Thomas Potts. And that's why we're here now, because Thomas Potts was the clerk to the courts, and he recorded everything that was said. We have an eyewitness account of the actual proceedings, and he wrote this book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire, which earned him a fortune. And to this very day, his relatives get huge royalties from the book itself. Those 3 people from London were met by Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, along with William Holden and Nicholas Bannister, 3 other local magistrates. The jury are all male, and the prosecution is all male, because in 1612, women are not allowed any responsibilities of any kind. The little girl, Jeanette Device, is brought into court. Her mother noticed that she's put weight on. She's wearing a lovely white dress and a lovely white bonnet and beautiful white shoes, and she is picked up by Roger Nowell and put on top of the desk. And she tells the court how these 4 dogs, Tib, Ball, Fancy and Dandy, had come to the little cottage called Malkin Tower, and how the dogs had suckled from the flesh, drawing blood from them and telling them to fashion clay pitchers. Her mother Elizabeth shouted, "Jeanette, stop it! You don't know what you're saying, stop it!" "Have my mother removed from the court, sir. She's upsetting me." And her mother was taken back down to the cells. Now the jury believed that a little girl of this age could not be manipulated, and the crimes against all those people were very, very high. In the case of Demdike, she is found guilty of the murder of Rafe Ashton of Downham by witchcraft, the child of Richard Baldwin of Burnley by witchcraft, and indeed Henry Mitten of witchcraft. Because she has died, her own granddaughter gives evidence against her. Bessie Chappitt is found guilty of the murder of 5 local people, the murder of Hugh and Anne Moore, Anne and Robert Nutter, and also John Device, by having a dog called Fancy that gave her special powers. She is so ill through malnutrition, she can hardly speak, but she is found guilty, indeed, of all those murders. The little girl on the table, of course, confirmed this. Then came the mother, Elizabeth. She's in a very bad state of health, and she is found guilty of the murder of John and Josh Robinson. But her own granddaughter, the chief witness, confirms that her mother is a witch, and her mother is guilty of those crimes. Roger Nowell is delighted, because with each witch being convicted, he is going to curry favour to England. Then came Catherine Hughes of Cone. She is found guilty of the murder of Anne Folds of Cone, and also attending the Good Friday meeting, which the little girl Jeanette pointed out once again. But this is where Steven Spielberg should really come into the programme, because there were three people there who really should not have been there. John and Jane Bulcock, they're a mother and son, hard-working farmers, and they rented their farm off a lady called Alice Nutter. Alice was an exceptionally wealthy lady. She could read, she could write, and her home is still there to this very day. It's called Roughly Old Hall. Her husband died, and his job was to extract rents off the farmers that farmed on their land. And John and Jane went to see her, and they said, "Mom, someone has been taking our cattle, our sheep, and knocking our fencing back. Don't worry, I shall go and see the local magistrate, Roger Noel." She made her way to the magistrate to get the land dispute sorted, but because she was a woman, Roger Noel refused to see her. So therefore she went over his head to see senior magistrates, and they awarded the land back to her, and indeed the Bulcock's farm as well. Roger Noel was furious. "I need to get revenge. How can I?" He had the trump card up his sleeve. The little girl still standing on the table, little Jeanette Device. And he pointed out John, Jane, and Alice by saying to Jeanette in front of the jury, "Jeanette, these people here, John and Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter, were they at your home Good Friday in the forest of Pendle?" "They were, sir." A look of shock and horror came across their faces as John and Jane are being found guilty of witchcraft, the murder of a little girl called Jean Mead of Harrogate in West Yorkshire. In the case of Alice Nutter, who was a noblewoman who could read and write, she's found guilty of aiding Demdike and Alison Device in the murder of Mr. Henry Mitten of Roughly because he wouldn't give her a penny. In court, she said, "Sir, I don't need to beg. I'm a woman of wealth." But the little girl on the table had secured her fate. The Pendle witches were all executed on the 20th of August 1612 in Lancaster in front of huge, huge crowds. Watching that day was a little girl who had incriminated them all, holding the hand of Roger Noel. And as soon as they all stopped twitching on the pillory, as they drew their last breath, Roger Noel said, "Goodbye. But surely, sir, and go back to that lovely warm house of yours, sir. Goodbye." He had used her. She made the long journey back to a cold and empty cottage, knowing full well that her information had claimed the lives of all those people I just mentioned. We know she survived because 3 years later, a young boy called Edmund Robinson said he'd been walking for the forest of Pendle and seen her commit acts of witchcraft. With her family reputation, it's taken very, very seriously, and she is arrested. Sent to London, stripped naked, they looked for marks on her body. Up to Lancaster, the same thing again. And after 2.5 years of travelling up and down the country, this young boy Robinson said, "Actually, I made it all up. I didn't see her do anything." So witchcraft, or the superstition surrounding it, absolutely destroyed that young girl's life and indeed her entire family. And there we have the Pendle Witch story.
Wow.
Yeah. Witch stories, they affect me in a way because it was so easy to blame someone for being a witch,
Yeah.
and they believed it immediately.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm still flabbergasted by how um, naive or negligent people were if it comes to the accusations of being a witch.
Yeah.
Still, it
Um,
baffles me.
yeah, Shane, in 2012, in the village of Roughly, where Alice Nutter came from, myself and two big tourism organisations, we got together and we unveiled a statue to Alice in her village. And the statue has become very, very much a symbol of female rights because Alice lost her life, nothing to do with witchcraft, but the fact she was a woman who had a brain she was not allowed to use because she was a woman.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
put Alice in the same league as Emmeline Pankhurst, who was a suffragette in Manchester, who went on hunger strike because she wasn't allowed to vote. Edith Cavell, who was a great British nurse who was shot by the Germans in World War One for getting Allied prisoners out of Belgium. And a lovely girl called Grace Darling from the northeast of England, who rowed out by herself in a little lifeboat to rescue people from a stricken liner in the 1860s. But the story is sad. We did get a petition to get the Pendle Witches pardoned. 12,000 people signed the petition, but we got a letter back from the government, the British government, who said, "These people are enemies of the state as found guilty by King James's courts, 20th of August, 1612, as found guilty. So they're still convicted witches.
Wow.
That's bad. I do have to visit the statue once.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's going to be a bucket list thing, I think, to pay my respects.
It will
yeah,
be.
sure thing. Sure thing.
Yeah, definitely. All right. About the tours, is there a tour you would love to do or really love to do, given the chance?
Well, when it comes to tours, Shane, I love ghost walks, and I do about 14 ghost walks in 3 British counties. But in my case, what I do is I like to interview people and get their stories. And you can always tell when someone is telling you shall I say, a fib, if you will. You can always tell when someone's being very honest, like my father was, like my mother was. I mean, they wouldn't need to lie. I've learned over the years when someone is telling a genuine story from their hearts, really. Would you like another story, folks? Are we okay for time?
Oh, we have time enough.
Yep.
Okay. Would you like another eyewitness ghost story?
Yes, please.
I,
Okay. We're now going to turn the clock back in time um, to 1997, when I started the guided walk in the market town of Blackburn, and I needed stories. And I met a marvellous chap called Bill Morris. Bill, lovely man. We went to the local pub over a pint of beer and a pie, which is a great British tradition. He told me a ghost story which has always stayed with me. He said that he loved the railway line. And as a little boy, he had a vegetable patch right next to the East Lancashire Railway. He would help his mum dig up the potatoes, the carrots, spinach, etc. And as the trains went past the end of the garden, he would wave at the engine drivers, and they, of course, would go as the trains went past. Bill told his mum and dad, when I leave school, I want to work on the railway. He left school at 14 and got a job at the local railway station as what's called a wheel tapper. When the trains came in, he would tap the wheels and make sure they weren't cracked. Age of 18, he became a fireman on a steam locomotive. His job, of course, was to keep the boiler nice and warm. And just after his 21st birthday, he got a marvellous job as an engine driver. He would take the engine up to the city of Edinburgh in Scotland, down to the city of London. But when he went past his mum and dad's house, he would, and they'd go rushing down to the garden to watch the train go by. In the summer of 1952, he took the engine down the line, and not too far from the town of Darwin in North Lancashire, he came across the Sough Tunnel, which is a very, very long tunnel. On either side of the tunnel, you've got these beautiful open green fields full of sheep, full of cattle. And he saw a little boy with straw-coloured hair sitting on the fence very, very near the tunnel entrance. The little boy would wave as the train went down the line, and Bill would wave back at him, knowing exactly what was going through the little boy's mind, because he too had once been a little boy. He saw him every day for the next 5 weeks. He was always sitting on the fence, very near the tunnel entrance. However, in October that year, Bill took the engine down the line and noticed he wasn't there. He was standing in the centre of the field, surrounded by sheep and cattle. And as the train came down the line, the little boy looked up and started to run towards the fencing. And Bill noted he was running through sleeping sheep. The sheep didn't even know he was actually there. The train went into the tunnel and they got to the city of Manchester. They went to the buffet bar at the station at Manchester, and the fireman said, "Bill, you've been very, very quiet. What's the problem?" "Well, it concerns me," said Bill. "What concerns you?" said the fireman. "Well, the little boy we see with the straw-coloured hair sitting on the fence near the tunnel entrance, he wasn't there today. He was in the field, surrounded by a flock of sheep. He started to run towards the fence when he saw us come down the line. He was running through sleeping sheep. No, 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 you're seeing things, said the fireman. Well, they changed the freight over and came back up north. As the train was about to enter the tunnel from the Manchester side, Bill noted a red light. He slowed the engine down, and the light was being held aloft by a police sergeant. What's wrong, Sergeant? Shouted Bill. Oh, terrible. A young lad's been killed at the entrance to the tunnel. Oh, Sergeant, that is terrible. Aye, he lost his brother there 5 years ago. Oh, Sergeant, that's heartbreaking. Aye, it is. We'd just been to see the parents. It wasn't pleasant. No, 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 it wouldn't be, said Bill. Word filtered through the tunnel. They could take the train through it. As Bill brought the steam engine through the length of the tunnel, it emerged into bright, bright sunshine, and Bill glanced to the left, and he saw the straw-coloured haired boy holding the hand of a much taller boy. As Bill turned to wave at them, they both raised their hands, and both literally faded into thin air. The hair on Bill's neck rose as he realised he was looking at something very, very paranormal. Elbowed the fireman. Look at that! Look at that! Sorry, too busy shoveling. Bill never saw them again. We can always tell when someone's being very honest and very truthful, and that story came from Bill's heart. A beautiful story and a genuine ghost story. I did do some research on the railway line, and yes, in 1949 and 1952, two brothers were both killed at the entrance to the tunnel. So it seems that Bill really was telling the truth.
Wow.
Cool. That's an amazing story.
Yeah, it is.
Very amazing story. I do have to tell
Absolutely.
you, you have a very, very nice storytelling voice.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it, Shane. It's a pleasure to come into a show like yours. I do apologise for the TikTok mistake before, but it's really nice to be able to do a chat in my own home, really, and to an audience as well, which is quite nice, really.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Absolutely do.
Yeah.
Is the next question for me or your, Mary?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. Is there a group that was on your tour that stayed with you until this day? For something happening, like
Yes,
a fun thing or creepy?
I do get a lot of paranormal organisations. Like they're all British based, although I do get some American ones sometimes. And I will take them onto Pendle Hill at night time to the little cottage I mentioned, Malkin Tower, and tell the story there. And what has happened on a few occasions is this beautiful, beautiful aroma has come from like walking into a market garden, like walking into a flower shop. And this happened even in January and December when there's no flowers around, but it's a beautiful, beautiful aroma. The Haunted Happenings team from Nottingham, they've been very, very loyal. They book every year, and they never get tired of the stories, really.
That's cool. That's very cool. I love that. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to do that again. We have to do that once because we have never done this, like the ghost tours. We were planning to, but a lot of things happened around our tour to England. So we
Yeah,
do have to do a ghost tour once, and I think you're the
you'd be
one
very
to
welcome.
do
You're very welcome,
it.
Jane. Yeah, very welcome.
Yes, I would love to. I would very love to.
Yeah.
Um, you participated in Dr. Munn's Tales of Horror as a voice actor. Could you tell us about that?
I have provided voiceovers, also, I mean, podcasts, but I love reading a good script. And as you said before, Shane, I look at myself as just as a tour guide, but really as a storyteller. And would you please, sometimes I actually get invited to primary schools. And I'm quite horrified at first because I say to the teachers, do the kids not mind blood, gore, and horror? Oh, no, no, no more the merry, they say sometimes. But they also say that a good ghost story can capture the imagination, Shane. It can capture the imagination. and they say wish we could do the same with mathematics and English, because I think everyone does love a good ghost story. They really do, and they do. A good ghost story can be fascinating, particularly when you know it's come from a very, very honest person like my dad, like Bill, who wouldn't need to lie about anything really.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Oh, true. Very much true. I wish we had more people like you in the Netherlands because I haven't found them yet. I wish we did.
Well, you live in a beautiful country, and I've been to the Netherlands on quite a few occasions, and always very, very welcomed, which is very nice. Particularly in the town of Arnhem, I've been to Arnhem a few times, and the locals there are very, very, very warm-hearted and very, very pleasant towards everyone. Really, I find.
Yeah.
True. Very much, very
Especially,
true.
yeah, especially certain seasons, and
Yeah.
yeah, really, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Your turn,
Are you
Mary.
going to ask more things, Shane?
No, I give
we
this one
talk
to you.
what?
I'm gonna give this one to you.
Oh, yeah. You started with Arnhem, and also Oosterbeek has a special place for you. We talked about it in Messenger, and I saw 2 weeks ago a very familiar picture. You at the grave in Oosterbeek.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
quite correct, really. I
yeah,
do know that where I come from in North Lancashire, in the actual market garden operation, you had what's called glider-borne infantry, like glider-borne
yeah,
infantry, and I did meet a marvelous chap called Bryn Johnson. He was actually one of the gliders on market garden, and he was quite badly wounded actually. But there's a lovely story from our local pub. There's a 10-shilling note in a picture frame, and his mum and dad left it for him. After the war, when he came home, he'd have a good drink. But he was very, very badly wounded in Arnhem. Lost one leg actually, but he did get back home. But he said that had it not been for the Dutch civilians, he would have lost his life in the St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Arnhem. They said the nurses there were and the doctors were fantastic, absolutely
yeah,
fantastic, and he owed his life to the nurses at the St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Arnhem itself. Yeah.
yeah. I know the place. My children were born there. That's why I know
Right.
it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very familiar. This yeah, now they are residentials, but I think they turned 5 years ago to a residential place. But before that it was a big hospital, one of the biggest in Ireland.
Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm so surprised it wasn't badly damaged, really, because it was very much in the battlefield, really, wasn't it?
yeah, it was, but it's on the border of Arnhem, and the
Yeah.
battle, the most homes were destroyed in the city center because of the bridge. It was in the
The
center
bridge.
of
Yeah.
Arnhem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Germans were paranoid and destroyed a lot of houses, bombarded everything. So yeah,
Yes.
they were lucky. And if you go to Hartenstein in
Yes.
Oosterbeek, that was
I have
damaged
been
as
there. Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I worked there. So yeah,
Such a historic
beautiful.
building, Mary. Such a historic building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, the English were there stationed before the Germans closed in, and the perimeter
Yeah.
went smaller and smaller, and they have to flee across the Rhine to Driel, across the road.
Yeah.
Absolutely
And
marvelous, and they, they kept it as close as it was.
yeah, Mary, I believe there was a very, very brave lady called Kate to Horst. She was the
Yeah,
angel of Arnhem, wasn't she?
yeah,
Kate. And
yeah,
I mean, her home was destroyed, wasn't it? Her home was very badly destroyed near the church at Oosterbeek. And I
Yeah,
mean, she tended to lots of boys who died, didn't she? And
yeah,
for a lot of those young boys, she was the last female they ever saw. You know, yeah,
absolutely. And there are books, um, especially about her, the Angel of Arnhem. So
the Angel of Arnhem, yes, Kate to
yeah,
Horst, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
very brave
everyone
woman as well,
knows.
really.
Yeah, very brave. Yeah, and just a small thing. We had also a celebrity in Oosterbeek. Now I have to check her name because I forgot.
Mhm.
It
Oh my
happens.
God. Uh, Yeah, just ask a question. I will look it up.
All right. Um,
Yeah.
a bit back in the stories about your work on audiobooks. What is it like to be a voice actor?
Well, it all happened by accident, really, Shane. It happened by accident. Um, I think in every human being, there's someone else trying to get out, really. When I left
Mm,
school, I had no qualifications whatsoever. And I worked in factories. I was in the army myself for a short while and doing jobs that I wasn't very, very happy in, really. And then in 1987, I met my wife and I took a keen interest in my local town, which had a very old castle, an 800-year-old castle from the Norman conquest. And I got a book in the town and I started doing guided tours. But I did find through a good friend of mine in the city of York that ghost walks seem to be the most popular ones, really, for tourists. And here in the United Kingdom, I've got quite a good reputation for being a leading ghost walker. But the stories I use are all eyewitness. That's the difference, really. I will use some historical stories, but I tend to prefer to use eyewitness stories. And one thing I do love is going to a studio and creating a picture because I think radio or podcasts are a great way of getting a story over because you don't need a set, you just need your imagination, and you could go anywhere
exactly.
in the world with your imagination. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I love listening to podcasts. It doesn't matter if it's ghost stories or true crime. My imaginations go everywhere, especially with the
yeah, yeah,
paranormal stories. When it comes to ghost stories, mine's like, oh, wow. Well,
Yeah,
you tell me this, but I see this. I need to go there. I need to see it.
yeah.
So yeah,
I
did
love
you find the name?
yeah, I found it. Audrey Hepburn. Oh my God, I tell it weekly. She was in Arnhem and for quite some time, and now you can actually do the Audrey Hepburn walk through Arnhem and Oosterbeek to the places where she's been. So
marvelous,
that was,
marvelous.
yeah, really
That's cool.
marvelous. It is.
You know what I
Such
The
just
best.
realized, Mary?
What?
I've never been to the museum you worked at.
Not as soon as you come. As soon as you come here, we will go there. You get a special tour. I take the best tour guide.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah, I will. I will because we have
cool.
very good tour guides, and
Yeah, I just
he can
realized
tell
it. You worked there
so
for
much.
years now.
Never been there.
No,
Oh my
because
God.
the stupidest part is I love war stories and the history that's made the war stories and everything because there's a
Yeah,
Oh
lot
yeah,
of rich history in there. And
yeah,
I used to love everything that had to do with the Second World War, not the thing that
yes,
happened, but the history behind it. And
yeah.
I've
oh
never
yeah,
been to that museum. That's bad.
yeah.
Did you go to the 4045 museum?
No.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I went to
Oh,
Hartenstein and
yeah,
we went to the Wolf Hayes. and
Yeah.
Renkham Heath, and then made my way into Oosterbeek to the bridge by taking the lion and then the leopard and the tiger routes really into the town. But
You
absolutely
went-
fascinating, really.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
are. They
absolutely
really are.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Oh,
And
it's
now,
fascinating.
yeah, did you visit the airborne experience?
Yes, I did. I did. That was amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. It
Yeah,
really was. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they did
But
a
I have got
really
I've
great
got a
job.
World War II ghost story. Would you like to hear that, folks? Have we got
Absolutely.
enough time?
Absolutely.
Do we have enough time? Okay.
Enough.
Yes, we have.
Again, this is an eyewitness story, an eyewitness account. And of course, we are getting towards Christmas, and it's very much a Christmas ghost story. I met 20 years ago a marvelous chap called Billy Lakin. Billy came to my house. I made him a cup of coffee, and he brought out from his pocket a photograph of 57 young men standing in front of St. Mary's Parish Church office, which was used by the Home Guard, the Territorial Army in World War II. On the back of the photograph was everyone's name and the word September 1939. That's when Great Britain and the Commonwealth declared war on Nazi Germany. Uh, so the photograph was taken in 1939 and they made their way across the English Channel to a place called the Maginot Line in France. And the French tell them, don't worry, the Germans will never get through the Maginot Line. And for 10 months, Bill walked up and down the Maginot Line. It was called the Phony War. But this all changed on the 10th of May, 1940, when the Germans launched what we now call Blitzkrieg. And Bill was horrified. He was told on the 10th of May, just leave all the equipment. We're going to Dunkirk, the French port of Dunkirk. When he got there, the whole of Dunkirk was on fire. He got to the sand dunes, and all he could see were thousands of British troops, all waiting to be evacuated. And he took his tin helmet off and used it to dig a small trench in the side of a sand dune, climbed inside the sand dune for some protection, because the German aircraft were machine gunning the beaches. On the second day, they were told they were going to be evacuated, and Bill made his way down to the water's edge at Dunkirk. He kept his rifle above his head to keep the working parts free of salt water when a German aircraft came down the beach and opened fire. He dived under the water, losing his pack, his rifle, and his helmet. When he came to the surface, the water was crimson red with the blood of his mates. He felt a hand grab his jacket. He was pulled into a small rowing boat by a Royal Naval sailor and then rowed out to a larger warship where he received the finest meal he's ever had, a corned beef sandwich and a mug of tea, and what we call a Woodbine cigarette, rather a nice, strong cigarette. He got to Dover in England and couldn't find any of his mates. He was told, don't worry, we know where you've come from. You don't need a rail ticket. Just you get back to your home battalion, which in his case was St. Mary's Parish Church office in Clitheroe, Lancashire. The train took him from Dover to London, London to Preston, and then to the beautiful market town of Clitheroe. He said he was so delighted to get back home again, he actually kissed the railway platform. He then walked up to the St. Mary's Parish Church. He could have gone straight back to his mother and father's house, but he made his way to the drill hall there, the old TA hall, St. Mary's Parish Church. He opened the door, and out of those 57 young men on the photograph, only 18 had got back home, including himself. They were told there and then to make up the numbers. In those days, if you were 18, you were conscripted. If you were 17, you could join up, but you had to have your mother and father's consent. Now, Billy was 19. He had a young friend who was 17. And this young boy said, oh, Bill, go and see me mum and dad. Get them to sign this consent form. I want to fight for my country. Bill saw this young boy's mother and father, and they said, he's only 17. The war could be over next year anyway. Oh, please, mum, please, dad. I want to fight for my country. They gave in on one condition, that condition being that Billy would look after him like a brother, and he swore he would do to both the young boy's parents. The platoon were then trained, and sent to the beautiful Greek island of Crete to make up the garrison there, which consisted of British, Australian, and New Zealand armed forces. On the 21st of May 1941, the Germans launched a highly disciplined airborne invasion of the island of Crete by using the very cream of the German armed forces. The fighting on the island was very intense. The New Zealanders very nearly turned it around, but they had no air cover, and the Germans dominated the sky. And in the fighting, the Clitheroe platoon lost 27 men killed, one of them being the 17-year-old young boy. Billy was captured. He was absolutely heartbroken at the death of this young boy and blamed himself entirely. From his prison of war camp in Poland, through the Red Cross, he could write letters home, and he wrote a letter to this young boy's mother and father, just simply begging their forgiveness. They did forgive him, but Billy never forgave himself until the 24th of December 1968, when he made his way to the old drill hall to watch the Clitheroe Amateur Operatic Society's Christmas play, which was called A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. He was one of the last people to leave the theatre and stood outside and lit a cigarette. As he lit the cigarette, he looked at the wall where the photograph was taken in 1939, and he thought of all those young men that never came home. He finished the cigarette and he stubbed it out with his foot, walked in front of the building and turned left down what we call a snickle way, a little ginnel, a little alleyway. As he turned, he heard three voices. "Hey, Bill! Hey, Bill! Hey, Billy!" He turned round and saw the ghost of the young lad in British Army uniform. The first thing Bill noted was this young boy had not aged a day. He looked exactly as he had done on Crete in 1941. The boy rose his arm. "Bill, don't worry about me, Bill. Don't worry about me. I'm fine, Bill. I'm fine." With that, Billy's knees gave way. He knelt on the cobblestones in that little alleyway, and in his own words, he bellowed like a wounded animal. The tears streamed down his cheeks. He almost yelped in pain. The boy turned, smiled, and vaporized. It took Bill 20 minutes to get to his feet. He was deeply traumatized and deeply shocked what he'd just taken in. He walked home that night, past the happy Christmas revelers. He didn't feel like celebrating anything. He got home, and strange enough, he had the finest night's sleep he'd had in years. The following morning, he was woken by the Christmas bells of the local churches, St. James, St. Peter, and indeed St. William's. He got out of bed and felt totally different. He made his way to the bathroom and opened the bathroom door and caught his reflection in the shaving mirror. And he noted a change in his facial appearance. For the first time since 1941, he was actually smiling, and he felt he'd been truly forgiven for the death of this young boy all those years ago on the island of Crete. I will never forget Bill's words as he left my house that day. He said, "Simon, I did not believe in ghosts until I saw one with my own eyes." And they're Bill's words, not mine. Billy died a good 20 years ago. Because I knew him, I went to his funeral. I then went to the interment at the local cemetery, and the two elderly gentlemen by the cemetery itself. And I had a diplomatic word with both of them. They said, "Oh yes, we all got captured by the Germans at Crete." I mentioned the young boy. "Oh yes, yes," said one of them. Billy sent him back to the ammunition truck to hide behind the metal tailgate of the truck to give him some protection. But a German sniper caught him in open ground, and he was killed instantly. Of course, here in England, every November we buy what's called a poppy, which goes to the Royal British Legion. And I buy one. I always think of those two boys. It was only crime really were to be in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong century. But that story came from Bill's heart. It's a very touching story.
It is.
Yeah, it is. We got a comment. Love the way you tell these stories very vividly. Great. From
Yeah.
Niels.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Niels. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was
I love
the
listening to
essence.
this.
Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. I love a good story, and not everyone can tell them.
Mm-mm. I'm not gonna do that because people are gonna fall asleep when I do. I don't have the voice for that. Too monotone.
Absolutely
Mm,
marvelous.
yeah,
you,
definitely.
Mary. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Um, Last couple of questions. You did also write a book. Am I correct?
That's quite correct, Mary. I've got a book called Ghostly Tales of the Unexpected. The Unexpected. Some of the stories are eyewitness accounts, and one or two I've conjured up my own imagination. But again, it's all designed for entertainment purposes, really. And
Yeah.
that book can be obtained on Amazon itself.
Hmm. I have to take a look at
Oh,
that.
absolutely. We can order Amazon, so it won't be a
Yeah,
problem. I, w- I will look for it, and otherwise we buy it next year in England.
Sure thing, yes. Yeah.
definitely.
If people want to follow you, where can they find you?
I think the best thing, really, Mary, would be on Facebook under Top Hat Tours. Top Hat Tours Facebook, and on there, there's a lot of YouTube material. I do have a series on YouTube, some great stories called Tales from the Graves. They're all on YouTube, and they go all over the country. And I go to various locations and bring the stories to life from those areas, really, which is good fun.
Yeah,
Cool.
And they've done quite well. Tales from the Graves on YouTube.
we
I'm
will
gonna
look
have to
for
look that
that.
up because we need to subscribe to that.
Sure
Definitely.
Absolutely.
thing.
We love it. We love it. I
Hmm.
want to thank you for your time, and it was an absolute pleasure to hear your stories. And Shane, you
Yes,
take it.
I take it. Well, like Mary said, we want to thank you for joining our show and
My
telling these
pleasure.
great stories because I've enjoyed them very much. Um, it would be an honor for us if you would wait for us backstage so we can talk a little afterwards.
Sure thing. Sure
But if
thing.
you don't, yeah, okay. If you don't have time, that's fine as well. Then we talk later. But I'm going to take you out of the show, and then we are going to say goodbye to everybody. So
Very
if
good.
you want to say your greetings for this evening to everybody who watched,
Sure thing. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Shane and Mary for very, very kindly having me on the show. Like Mary, I've got a soft spot for Arnhem. I really, really do. And it's a place I love dearly. And it's been an absolute pleasure being on the show tonight. Thank you very much, Neve, for having me. And I'd love to come on the show again sometime. Thank you.
you are very welcome to join again. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Simon, we will talk to you in a little bit.
Sure thing.
All right. Well,
Well,
um,
I'm
Saturday.
go- no, I'm on Friday.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Never mind.
Yes,
I didn't say anything
yes,
because I'm not there Friday because I have to help some people. Um,
yeah.
I booked a
I
double
have
date.
I have a different co-host. Your
Yeah,
wife will be co-hosting this time, and
yes,
we have
she will join.
yes,
Yeah,
she has the
she will
questions.
join on my TikTok.
Yes, perfect. So we will have our founder and good friend Jeremy York, but
Yes.
you were a bit too early. We have Saturday. We have a
Sorry.
very special guest, and I made sure he has the StreamYard link because we
Yep.
have to look on the StreamYard because he's not on TikTok. And
Nope.
as you notice, our guest TikTok is acting up. So we don't
Yeah.
know what the problem is. And we have to fix it first. But next Saturday, we have Rick McCallum from the
Hmm.
Hollywood Ghost Hunters.
Yes, we do.
And I'm so glad we have him. And
Yeah,
we're
we do.
going to talk about the Hollywood Ghost Hunters, his experience with the Ghost Adventures crew, his tours to Scotland and Ireland, and he's
Hmm.
going to give tours next year in Ireland. He wrote books, and he's also a stuntman. So
Yep.
that's what we are going to talk about. You don't
So
want to
everybody, you don't want to miss that, and you have to write down your questions already for tomorrow, for Friday and Saturday, of course, because Friday we have a very interesting guest as well. Um,
yeah,
yeah, our founder. So you have to be
it will
nice.
be a blast. It will be a blast.
Yeah, it
Because,
will
yes,
definitely.
he's not just our founder, he's a songwriter. He writes books, big novels. He does do events. He does, yeah, that. I'm still completely flabbergasted by the ghost stories, but
Hmm.
he does make events. He has the giving tree, so he's giving back to the community by doing ghost hunts once a year for
Yep.
ambulance personnel, the firemen, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
You name it, he does it. You
Absolutely,
name it, and he will do it.
absolutely. He has a game channel. He does wrestling. Um, I don't know anything he doesn't do. So
Almost everything.
yeah,
And then he's so busy, he still feels guilty for not doing anything.
absolutely, absolutely. So
In other words, we love him.
yeah, to pieces.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Like we said, we want to thank everybody for watching, and we hope
Absolutely.
to see you Friday and Saturday, because two different shows. Fridays on TikTok and Saturdays here again. So until the next one, I think that's the only thing we can say.
Yes.
Thank you for
To the
watching.
next one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. We hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe.